morning, everybody. Thank you so much for jumping on. We did record this, so we'll send this out afterwards. But we have a great treat here. Richard Klein from Diamond Law Group, and I'm going to give a quick accolade. Rich fought. So there's one, having him on is a gift. But two, I just wanted to share with you how hard Rich fought to get in front of this group. So I try to, one thing I'm opening my mind to is everybody that we meet has a lesson. And Rich gave me a quick lesson in being relentless. So he was kind, but he was relentless about getting in front of these folks. And a couple of things, 5:01 on a Sunday morning, he said, hey, just wanted to follow up on that. I'm like, I got to respect this guy that every single day he's on his grind and managing, transactions to a high level, his business to a high level, and then his himself. So I said, you know what? This is a guy I want to spend some time with because we are the average of the 5 people we spend our most time with, and everybody is brought into our life to teach us something. So I think Rich was brought into my life at this moment to teach me how to be relentless, and then what you get out of life by being relentless. And I wanted to share that with everybody. So I'm going to shut up. He has a great content about a really critical part of being a realtor and the synchronicity between us and our attorney and how that makes a difference for our clients. So Rich sent me a whole bunch of stuff that he teaches consistently and that he's an expert in. And this particular part, I thought I haven't taught it yet. It's important and we overlook it, but it makes all the difference in the world. And I do have a transaction going on right now with Rich where I got to see firsthand the way that he managed the client's wishes, desires, expectations, and risk profile. And it was beautifully done. I was like, that's because he spends a lot of time right in this pocket about stuff that he's going to share with us today. So without further ado, Rich, I'm going to shut my mouth, turn it over to you. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Joshua, for the invitation here today, even though I kind of forced you to do it.
No, it was great.
So, whenever I listen to somebody speak, time is limited. So, I'm filming a lot of social media content now. When I first started doing this, I'm like, I'm going to have people on for an hour and everyone's going to watch it and it's going to be great. And then when I started filming these things, we just shot 4 videos on Saturday and we filmed for 6 hours. Those 4 videos are going to break down to 4 2-minute videos, but we were there for hours and hours and hours. And, it started to reach the point where I was like, if I'm going to listen to somebody like a podcast, you couldn't catch me at an hour to do anything. My time is so limited and there has to be added value. So then we came up with the idea, especially with all this Zoom and social distancing and remote and all that stuff, that I want to add value. So for everyone who's watching today, there's going to be 1 CE credit that I'll email to Joshua, who's taken down a list of who's actually here today. It's a certificate. We give you the Coast Court number, and we do it every month. So we're going to be posting these online as well in the future if you want to watch them at that time. That way, basically, you need roughly 23 hours of CE credits, every 2 years plus the ethics. So if you just watch us for once a month, you have to do it anyway. We make a little bit light of it instead of some boring, stuffy, educational thing, and we'll go from there. So that being said, the thing that I contemplate is, besides added value, is well, why should we listen to you? What have you done? What have you accomplished? So myself, as of April of this year, somehow I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm only 41. So simple math tells you that literally half my life has been spent doing this. Part of the problem, though, that Joshua and I were discussing beforehand is when you work 9 to 5, that's great. But when you elongate your day to basically working, let's just say for our purposes now, instead of 8 hours, 16 hours a day, you're basically working twice as much. And for overtime, you get time and a half. So you actually accelerate your learning by working twice as much. So the old adage was, if you did something for 10,000 hours, you became an expert. 10,000 hours is 2.5 years. I don't consider that to be all too impressive nowadays, because you could just sit there watching football and be like, all right, I'm an expert in watching football. That doesn't impress me. So I go by transactions, right? So they say 10,000 transactions make you an expert. Well, how many have I done? We roughly close 1,000 transactions per year. 20 years, 20,000 transactions, double the professional. We just upgraded our, what we refer to as a heat map for transactions on our website. We did 1,300 buy sale transactions, not including any bank business, of which there is a ton due to low rates and refinances. Purchases and sales, 1,300. And then you start to look at companies as a whole, like how many did Douglas Elliman do? How many did all your other competitors do? And in cross section of it, 1,300 transactions is a lot of transactions. And why is this relevant to you? You learn something from those transactions. When you have a learning experience, it's not because everything's perfect, right? If I touch a stove 19 times and it's off, what have I learned? Nothing. If I touch it one time and it's on, you get burned, right? So from all of these transactions, they're not all great, things happen. But for the most part, what we're going to do today is accelerate your learning curve so that way you don't have to participate in 1,300 transactions to learn what we've learned, right? So with that in mind, this is a pretty predictable science that we got ourselves wrapped up into here. We know what's going to happen. If I said to any of the agents here, how do you get from listing the home or even securing the listing all the way through closing and getting paid? It's the same major steps, right? So I'm going to pick it up from everything that we can do before we get into contract, because in reality, these are what I refer to as the inevitables, right? These things are inevitably going to happen. And nowadays, are transactions moving fast or slow? Usually pretty fast, right? You list a house on Monday and you're in contract by Tuesday. I know this because I'm literally purchasing a property with the net MENA of your company. We were in contract in less than 24 hours. 24 hours. The property's on the market for less than 24 hours. We have our commitment. This was last week. We have our commitment appraisal already done. I already ordered title. We're ready to go. And you're like, wow, that's because it's you. It's not. As long as everyone's involved doing what they're supposed to do proactively instead of reactively, a lot of the issues that we experience could be avoided. All right. So without taking up too much time about the background, let's delve into it. All right. So my perfect real estate transaction is a open house with two different types of clients. Easy, right? They listen to what it is we have to say. They believe in us. They trust us. And then there's difficult. They don't want to hear anything we have to say about anything. And we're going to envision explaining to our client, we have two equal offers. They don't have anything to sell. They're putting down payments the same. All the financial terms are different. But what varies in that is the vendors that they utilize on their end and how that's going to affect us in the future. Because if you don't use your experience to relay to our clients what it is to expect, something's going to happen. They're going to be surprised. We are their psychiatrist, and they're just going to yell at us until they yell at us so much that they then start to blame us. And I got news for you. If you have an open permit, that's a you problem. That's not my fault. I'm just the bearer of bad news, right? And I don't internalize that. If you want to yell at me, that's great. But I didn't open up the permit. I'm here to resolve that. So what we're going to do is get a transparent, written explanation to our clients beforehand. So that way, if and when these terrible things that we're about to discuss happen, it's like, look, I hate to say I told you so, but back when I said you should have done this, you didn't. You made that decision. So I'm here to help you through it. Just like the doctors, you smoke cigarettes for 20 years. That's a you problem. You come in now, I will help you. But if I would have told you 20 years ago, don't do it, you're not going to blame me because you smoke cigarettes. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to get to the bottom of here. So in our perfect world, we have two different buyers, easy and difficult. And they're going to walk right into our open house, socially distanced, of course. And there's going to be 4 piles of documentation that we're going to have laid out in front of us. One of them is just going to be Douglas Elliman title, right? It's totally clear. We're good to go. Next, it's going to be an inspection report, a pre-inspection report of everything that the seller's willing to fix at that time, which again, we're going to dive into all these topics. Next, we have a list of attorneys that we recommend. You don't have to use them, but this is our suggestion. And then the same principle for the loan officers as well. All right. These are the 4 things that can go wrong, right? Attorneys, I deal with them every day. It's, we'll go into it, but it's not the easiest thing. Most of the attorneys out there have a litigious nature and they're ready to fight about everything, but this isn't the proper forum for that. All right. So from the beginning, I get a call after we hang up here today and they say, Douglas Elliman agent in Babylon, heard a lot about you. I want to list my home. You're like, great, love it. Let's go. Like, what documentation do you need for me to take the listing? Okay. So what happens is some agents don't necessarily ask the correct questions about what documentation the homeowner should be obtaining if they can. It's not obligated, but if we have a little bit of work beforehand, then we can work on any issues concurrently with the listing, as opposed to we get into contract, then there's a title issue, then there's a delay, and then everyone freaks out. Okay, that's what we're going to try to avoid. So the first thing, and again, you don't have to jot this down. I'll shoot over to Josh a cleaned up version of our itinerary today, is the deed, right? Sometimes people purchase the home and they weren't married at the time, and they purchased with a different last name, except that was 20 years ago, and they don't have anything with their maiden name. We need to have that marriage certificate, which some people may not have readily available. And then you need to contact New York State Board of Health. You think they're a little preoccupied right now? You better bet they are. And it's never going to get through the US Postal Service. It's going to be a nightmare, and it causes a lot of problems. Sometimes, unfortunately, people pass away when they forget somebody was even on contract. Happens, unfortunately, often. And sometimes there's life estates and other things that they may not have taken into consideration. So if you have the deed, it also sounds silly, but middle initials, that's a big problem. And sometimes it screws up names. Like I go by Rich, though I've been called much worse. But everything I take title to is Richard, right? So then you have to get into all these other things with the title company that they don't understand that I am who I say I am, the juniors, the seniors, and it just causes a lot of concern. So when you take somebody's name on the binder, don't just write Smith, like it should be actually match the deed, how they took title. So helpful. Next, title insurance policy. This happens literally every day in my life, multiple times per day. So what happens is we have a loan that's being satisfied at a closing. There's a certain amount of money that is collected for a satisfaction of mortgage. The problem is Nassau County and Suffolk County, they're always running out of money. And instead of raising taxes, they just charge you for basically anything else you want to do, including selling a home and paying off a mortgage. It's known as a satisfaction fee. But the problem is the bank is not in tune with what it is that the municipalities charge. And they literally, some banks still do, send an $80 check to Nassau County to record something that literally nowadays costs almost $1,000. So what does the county do? They kick it back to the bank. You think the bank does anything with this afterwards? No. What's the problem? This mortgage is still of record. Then our client who bought 10, 15, 20 years ago goes to sell. And what do they say? Well, there's a mortgage still against the property. Do you have any records of this? The answer, of course, is no, right? But if you have your owner's policy, the title insurance owner's policy, that literally will wipe it away within 2 minutes, because there's only 3 or 4 major title underwriters who insure these types of transactions. And they all have what's known as mutual indemnity, because they presumed if one of their colleagues underwrote this transaction originally, that that's okay for them. And they will literally just what they call omit the exception immediately. Other than that, you have to hire a company who takes forever because the banks are so inundated with these requests in order to get rid of it. Sometimes escrow needs to be held, and it just rubs people the wrong way. Like, how could this possibly happen, right? So the title insurance policy would be huge. Just a simple ask. Do you have the title insurance policy that says you actually own the home, right? Next, surveys. That's a whole different course, which we'll delve into in the future. Certificate of occupancies is a major concern. Open permits, violations, things of this nature. Mortgage statements. This happens literally every day too. Clients send me your mortgage statements and they send me one. What's the problem? 2 loans, right? They have 2 loans open. They forget that the HELOC is not like a credit card. It is secured against the property. So mortgage statements are helpful. And the banks change servicing so frequently. Nowadays, other documentation pertaining to the home, which are a real pain. Solar panels. It's a nightmare getting these things approved. If we know that there's a solar panel, good, start the initiation process, the transfer process immediately. This documentation and these things take time, right? If anyone's ever dealt with it before, it literally holds up many closings, and it doesn't need to, because sometimes we don't find out until we're in contract, and there's what they refer to as a UCC against the property. Then we start it, we've already been in contract for 45 days. That's a problem. We should have been doing these things concurrently from the beginning. Last but not least, tax grievances. Clients forget that they filed it because they have to do it for like 2 years in advance. These things need to be transferred as well, and those companies are behind too, especially around their filing season. So you take the listing, you say, I need all these documents. They get all the documents. Everything at that time, some of these things we could start working on way beforehand, because in our perfect scenario here with the great real estate transaction, we have one buyer walk in and they say, wow, there was an open permit, you guys forgot about it, or maybe it pre-existed when you purchased, but you didn't realize it because you weren't properly represented at that time, right? That happens all the time to us. And you worked it out beforehand and this title's ready to go. I don't want to rock the boat. I'm telling my attorney that I'm using this title company. difficult buyer on the other side, I'm not using any of this. I don't trust it. I'm going with my own people. And if it takes longer, then so be it. Right now, just from day one, when we have two identical offers, if you're the homeowner, dear homeowner, these are the circumstances we have. Who are you going with? We've already established that 1 out of the 4 major problem areas has been resolved. Again, your client may say, I'm not doing any of this stuff. I'm not gathering it. I don't have it. I don't want to be bothered. That's cool. Because guess what? As soon as you have this verbal conversation with them, every single person in my office knows, I don't care if somebody calls you and they sneeze, you send them an email 5 minutes later saying, we spoke, I said, bless you. That was the end of the conversation. Everything needs to be memorialized. People may not understand, right? And what better way to say, well, we sent this to you then in writing. If you didn't understand it, you should have objected then, because I presume if I talk to you and then send a follow-up email that you actually understand it, right? They may not remember it correctly, even if they did understand it, okay? So you have to put everything in writing, because I'm not going to be blamed for any of these issues, because that's how these conversations come off. And it's just unacceptable to me, because it's not my problem. I'm here to fix it, sometimes, hopefully proactively, okay? So dear client, spoke to you. Thank you so much for your trust in me to list and sell your home. We discussed this. I need all of these items because I'm trying to avoid any headaches in the future. It would be great if you can get it to me. If you have any questions, let me know. Just one simple email, just one, boilerplate form that you could send to them. This is everything we need. That would be great if you do so. Because ultimately, if you list and sell the home, even though technically the buyer is not represented by you, this is somebody else that has friends, family, colleagues, right? That they want to refer. Well, how was the transaction with Douglas Elliman? Well, it sucked. Oh my God, that's so surprising. How is it so terrible? Well, there was an open permit that the seller had, and I had to extend my rate, and everyone involved with the transaction was incompetent. Well, how is that a reflection on you? What did you do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong, right? It wasn't your home, it wasn't your open permit. But at least at the beginning, if you say there's an open permit and the buyer says, well, how was this missed? It's like, well, I asked the homeowner to get it. Here's the email that I sent to them requesting it. They just didn't do it, so I apologize. That's it, right? And then as Josh knows, sending one email is great. Following up with it's even better, right? So you literally in my office is some of the familiar faces that I see here. We follow up on every file every week. That's just the way it is. And some files get followed up with more frequently depending on the type of where we are within the transaction. If it's not in contract, if it's approaching the passed on or about date, or if it's in closing, these are various things that get followed up with more frequency, right? So you take the listing, and even though things move pretty quickly, following up every other day or every week is not the worst thing, right? Because you follow up one time, maybe they missed it, spam, whatever the case is. You follow up every single week. You say, now I follow up with you 5 times. So it sucks that there's a delay and you want to move to Florida, but we could have been working on this at the same exact time as we were working on everything else. But you take the listing January 1st, maybe you're in contract the way things go nowadays by January 7th, a week later. We don't get the title report nowadays for potentially 30 to 45 days. The problem is we want to close in 60 days. So if we just find out with one of these issues that's going to take time, it's never going to meet within the time frame that everyone else is expecting. And everyone else is looking to blame everyone else as to why it's an issue. The building department sucks and everyone else sucks. But at the same time, ultimately, this was a seller problem that we have to now fix. And it would be very helpful if the seller knew about these issues beforehand. That way we can make for a more seamless transaction, okay? And then worst case scenario, like I said before, and that'll be our theme for today, if the seller doesn't want to listen, that's totally cool, because ultimately what's happened is this is going to close and we will get paid eventually. It's just going to take more time and everyone else is going to be more aggravated than they need it to be, which is not the type of transaction that we want to have, all right? Especially because we need these people for referrals. Okay, so one other thing before we move on to the next topic of conversation, it's a really huge pet peeve of mine, and that is everyone being totally unprepared and surprised that when you sell or buy a co-op or condo, that is actually documentation that you need to review beforehand. We get a binder, and this happens so frequently, it's embarrassing to admit. We get a binder and they say, send out the contract immediately, the buyer's an appointment to sign at 10 o'clock. It's like, okay, that's cool. It's a co-op. How many shares are there? What's the maintenance? Is there an assessment? When does the lease expire? Does it include parking? Like, oh, I don't know, I'll find out from the management company. You think the management company cares about any of this? They don't, right? It's an inconvenience to them. And then God forbid they don't have any of the documentation. Guess what? They want money to replace the offering plan in the last 2 years financials and the bylaws and the application and all the other things that I'll email to you. And then the seller says, wait, I'm not paying for the stuff. The buyer wants it. Well, no, seller, it's your responsibility to obtain it. So if you take a co-op listing, you take a condo listing, the list of documents that I'm going to send to you guys, this should all be obtained up front. If somebody sent to me, I'm willing to go out on a limb for the last 20 years, besides New York City properties, because they deal with this all the time. For Long Island, where you have places like Great Neck or Long Beach, where there's prominent co-ops and condos, I could probably count on one hand how many times everyone sent everything together all at the same time, like literally. And it's a frustrating point for the clients too, because they want to, sometimes clients are in contract to buy already, and now they're trying to sell their co-op, and now we're being delayed potentially 30 days for the management company. Well, first the seller needs to try to look for these things, and the management company has to get them. Sometimes they need to print things, and it's just a nightmare to do. So in reality, it'd be great when you take a co-op or a condo, if we want our clients to love us afterwards for a seamless transaction, getting above asking could only go so far. And I hate to say that, but in reality, the price is great. Customer service thereafter is even better, okay? Because if we can't close that transaction within the time frame we want to be, it's like going to a great restaurant that has great food, but waiting for an hour to eat it after you're already hungry. It's nice, but at the same time, it's not what it should have been. All right. Next. So the homeowners have now entertained one aspect of the transaction, and they know what they could expect from the buyers, right? Easy buyers ready to go. They looked at this title report. This is going to speed things up. They love it. They're in full compliance with it. Second buyer says, I'm not doing any of this stuff. And they say, all right, well, everything being equal, what's the next step? Home inspection. Believe it or not, even in this limited inventory seller's market that we are maybe on the precipice of not being in, which is going to be my next continuing education that drops February 1st and all of our social media stuff, which we'll blast you and bother with later. The home inspection, believe it or not, these buyers, the mentality, which is something we're so huge into at the Diamond Law Group, it's what is the other person thinking and why are they thinking it, right? So you have a buyer that's in their estimation overpaying. They're not, they're just paying what market value is, but again, different topic for a different day. They're overpaying, and then they look at the home inspection and are like, oh my God, and they have like buyer's remorse because they say, I can't believe the outlets are not grounded. This is unfathomable that I'm paying 10% over asking, 50 grand over asking, and the outlets aren't grounded. And the yard is not sloped correctly. Like, this is unbelievable to me. They have to fix everything. And then the seller looks at them and says, like, there's like a literal line around the block. Do you really think I'm doing anything here? I'm calling the shots. I'm not doing anything, right? So, and then buyers lose offers over it. I have it happen very frequently where everyone wants me to send out the contract. Okay, well, when's the inspection? Oh, it's tomorrow. Okay. And then I hear from my client that they want everything fixed. I'm like, they're never doing this. We control the situation. It's our ball. If we give it to them, we may never get it back. So your choices are give them the ball and lose the home over all of these inspection items, or you can negotiate, or you can proceed as is. You can proceed as is right now. You can sign this contract. This house will be yours. And you're going to have to live with the ramifications for this decision. It's not going to be on me. It's not going to be my house. I didn't make the decision to purchase it. If you lose that house, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Okay, so move forward now or don't move forward, and we may not be capable of doing so in the future. And that's worst case scenario, which is what I do as an attorney, right? I'm here to avoid surprises because with my level of expertise and experience, I'm not surprised by anything anymore. I like to think I've heard and seen it all, though every now and then some crazy person likes to make my life a little bit more interesting than it needs to be. But for the most part, this is an inspection. It's either they're going to agree to it or they're not. And they're probably not going to do so. The house has been listed for 48 hours. You're their first offer. They're just going to try it out with, for them, if they have somebody else who's putting down a little bit less money, they may just go with them because why not? To them, it's like, if you go away, I'd rather take the risk of going with person B, who is not maybe as qualified, but maybe they don't want the inspection issues. That's the priority for me. All right. So the home inspection, what I suggest, and again, we'll go over how sellers may interpret this, is everyone thinks their house is perfect. And right now they may interpret their home being an open checkbook and they just list it for whatever they want. They'll get whatever they want, and that's great. But the problem is, until the buyers stop being nitpicky, if that ever could happen, then there may be certain issues within the home that the seller should upfront say, I'm aware of this issue, I'm not addressing it. Because here's how it normally works, right? Forget about buyers and sellers market. Let's just talk about a regular real estate transaction. You have two unsavvy people, a buyer and a seller, and they say, I am going to agree to these terms for whatever the purchase price is, but I don't really know the condition of the home, so I'm going to reserve the right to renegotiate in the future. Then they do the inspection, and the buyer says, I want a credit, I want to repair, or I want to reduce the price, right? And then the seller says, this is, I can't believe this is happening to me. We agreed on the price. Like, why? What gives you the right to think that you want to renegotiate? And then there's a lot of tension with this type of negotiation. And then we're nickel and diming about things we have no business talking about. Oh, the roof is 16 years old and there's one shingle missing because it was windy. And then we sit here and we negotiate prices and things that, like, we have no idea what we're talking about. It's just round numbers that people think it may cost. And it's in this confusion that they start to lose trust in everybody involved, because, like, I didn't even know this could happen, type of thing, right? So up front, if you said to the buyer, I did an inspection and I fixed anything I was going to fix, or I didn't fix anything at all. Here's the inspection. Here's 16 copies of it for everyone who walks in the door. Buyer, when you make an offer, I'm not reducing anything. You don't have to use my inspection, although it'll save you money, it'll certainly save you time. But if I'm telling you that every single thing contained herein is wrong, don't come back at me after we agreed on a price, because now you've been made aware of these things, and then try to renegotiate the same issues I told you I wasn't going to address beforehand. That never happens, right? So, and the buyer, it's not necessarily their fault because they don't know the condition of the home. Now, if we disclose it to them up front when they make their offer, the offer should stand. And again, they can conduct their own inspection. If they find anything new, that's not what we're talking about here. Something new that we didn't disclose up front, they certainly have every right to renegotiate. But if you make an offer for whatever the price is at that time, taking the exact condition of the home into consideration, you don't have the right to renegotiate at that time. You just don't. And it gives the seller more ground to stand on rather than trying to backtrack on credits or price reductions or repairs, which the repairs never come out the way that they're supposed to be anyway, right? So we're trying to avoid this entire situation. So going back to our perfect scenario here, we have the homeowner reviewing two different offers. We already talked about title, and we know the mentality of the buyers. Buyer A, the easy buyer, says, home inspection, great, flip through it, looks legit, save me money, save me time. What's the next step? Next buyer says, I need my guy to come in. He's not available to next week. And when I get it, you better believe I'm going to renegotiate everything, right? Therefore, so far, we've controlled title. We know exactly what's going to happen, or at least to the extent of our proactiveness, and the home inspection. Further, if the seller, because again, we're going to email them, just so you know, seller, we just discussed this, you might want to spend a couple $100 on a home inspection, because anything the buyer's going to want is going to be way more than what the inspection cost you, right? Everything's $1,000. Well, we already save money by doing the inspection up front. And if they say, no, I'm not spending money on this, when they get the counter terms after the inspection, they're not going to look at us and be like, this is preposterous. Like, how could this happen? It's like, well, I'm not really surprised by this. In fact, I tried to be a little bit proactive. I'm not saying told you so type of thing, but it's okay for you to be upset. I get that, but it certainly shouldn't be surprising. It's unfortunate, but it's nobody's fault, right? If anything, you could have avoided this situation by spending a couple $100 to begin with, but now we are where we are. We'll take care of it. And what are they not doing? You didn't tell me this could have happened, and how dare they, and all the other types of things that are going along with that. All right. So that's the home inspection. Next, and my favorite topic of conversation, attorneys, right? So one of the most frustrating things for me is right now I'm having a nice conversation with you guys, and I may get a call from a new client who says, hey, Rich, heard you were great, want to retain your services. What's the problem? I'm with you guys and can't be necessarily interrupted. I also have contract appointments and obviously closings. And it's unrealistic for me to be able to speak to somebody the very second that they demand that I am available. So again, if you can't already tell, I like to make a lot of analogies. It's the same thing with walking into your favorite restaurant Valentine's Day and demanding service at that time. Just unrealistic. The way that we prefer everyone go about it is the second that you are taking the listing is to refer an attorney at that time, right? You're working on the deal beforehand, and everything that we need to discuss with them, ultimately I'm going to need to discuss with them throughout the transaction. It makes it for a more efficient transaction if I could actually speak with them beforehand and reiterate the things we're going over. Do you have any of the title issues? Are you aware that the home inspection gives the buyer the right to renegotiate? And that way, when they receive an offer, they already have an attorney on retainer. They've already asked all of the questions that they feel are appropriate to make sure that they're comfortable proceeding, right? I have 3 kids, and it's not like I walked in to the hospital the day that we were going to give birth and be like, hey, who's around right now? Like, that answer sucks when you're talking about a chosen professional, right? You should have a comfort level. That's why people select their chosen professionals and form a relationship with them. Because imagine it from a buyer's perspective or a seller's perspective. They're at the home inspection. And what do? They're trying to call around to whoever's available because they need an attorney immediately. Again, going back to my example with Valentine's Day dinner, if you walk around and start demanding service with everyone else who has a reservation, where are you going to end up? Anyone who's available at that time just sucks. That's just the way it is. If people are busy, there's a reason that they're busy. And if people are properly staffed like we are, then you should be able to get back to people in a timely fashion. So not to get into the nitty gritty of our secret sauce about how we operate here, but we work with what we refer to as team aliases. So it's one email address that's spread apart to different people. So I myself am the head of the A team, and I have an associate who works under me. And I also have 2 paralegals that have combined over 20 years experience. And the goal behind that is, if I walk into Bobby Flay's Steakhouse, I'm like, hey, tell Bobby I want it medium rare. Like, Bobby Flay is so far away from this place at this point, but it doesn't matter because it's his brand. So when the A team gets an email, it's all hands on deck. I respond to it in the same manner in which all of my other well-trained and experienced staff will do so. So that way, it's not like I need to speak to Rich at this time. People don't even really know who they're talking to, because we have our names and our email signatures. But half the time, Josh will send an email out and I'll respond. He'll send another email out. If I'm doing this, somebody else who's CC'd on that message will respond, and he will have no difference. Well, you won't even know the difference. And it doesn't actually matter because you're getting the answer that you deserve and need in a timely fashion. It's always my favorite joke when people go away and they're like, sorry, I'm away this week. It's like, away this week? Like, how is that even acceptable to anyone involved on the other side? Right? The buyers retain the other attorney who's away President's Week with 0 coverage. Well, if the buyer wants to close that week, sucks to be them, right? But ultimately, those things end up affecting us. So when we're talking about attorneys, and you're going to see a lot of these spoofed parodies on our social media with attorney stereotypes. So you'll check that out when it comes out. But if you hear, like, I'm using my uncle who represented us in a speeding ticket 10 years ago, it is your duty and your obligation, as far as I am concerned, to notify all parties that is a bad move, okay? For many reasons. One, you get what you pay for, right? Okay, you should be paying somebody. It's just never works out with family members because they're either MIA, like literally, or they are too strict with everything because it's too close to home, right? And it's just something that they pay too much attention to. In terms of staff, my firm literally has 11 paralegals and we have 4 associates, because in reality, what I do best is sit behind a desk and answer. I was telling Josh beforehand, for a video that drops tomorrow about a day in my life, I received 1,300 emails one day. Sorry, it's October 1st. It wasn't even our busy season. I received 1,300 emails. And as part of that graphic, we show that in a month, I on average receive between 20,000 and 30,000 emails, but that's not even impressive. The impressive part about it is when I show the metrics of it, it's responded to within 15 minutes. Half of the emails that I receive responded to within 15 minutes. The other half, the other 40% are like within an hour. Then everything else gets scaled out because they take sleep and weekends into consideration. And we work the weekends as well. So, if you're not referring somebody or you're allowing somebody to retain the services of an attorney that just doesn't have the bandwidth, it's just not going to work out well. Because every single time I ask a question, if it takes them 3 days to get back to me, exponentially, that's how much longer it's going to take. As opposed to, like I said before, we were contracting a day, because Annette referred somebody on the seller's side who we all work with, and that's just the way it went. This isn't that complicated, okay? It's the same boilerplate contract that literally, as of this month, has been used for 21 years. It's the same 28 paragraphs. And again, it's a different continuing education where we go through it line by line, but we're not rewriting the Constitution, okay? I don't need the Democrats and Republicans to get together on this one. It's the same contract. And literally you need purchase price, down payment amount, the mortgage amount, closing date, personal property exclusions, any CO issues, and like literally that's it, okay? The fact that it takes attorneys more than 15 minutes to draft this and send it is mind-boggling to me. Then reviewing it, it's in bold. It literally has the contract, the new terms are in bold. And all you need to do is match that up when you speak with your client to make sure that everything is okay. If it's okay, I'm going to DocuSign this to you and we're going to wire the down payment. If you have any questions, we'll schedule a teleconference. But you're not in contract until both parties sign. Within another 15 minutes, they're fully capable of DocuSigning it and wiring it. We give the buyer, the sales attorney, a heads up that we're doing all of this. So if you want to schedule an appointment with your client at 1 p.m. today, you can do that. They then do the exact same thing and then send me back the contract. Like, why is that so complicated? Anything that takes more than like 3 days, to me, is just unacceptable. And it's usually a tone for how things are going to go. Because I'm a huge advocate in the way that they start is the way they're going to end. It's not like, oh, that was a nightmare to get into contract, but everything will be cool from now. It's like, no, it won't. No, it won't. If they say that they need 2 months and we agree on 1 month, they're going to take 2 months. Okay. Like, this is just ultimately what's going to happen. So in order to temper expectations realistically, you must be familiar with who the other side is using as an attorney, or even your own client. If you've never heard of them, you should be able to speak with an attorney to say, like, who is this person? And if I myself haven't heard of them, they're either brand new, which has its own issues, or they're a friend or a family member. And again, as we discussed, like, that's never a good thing. All right. So we have an interactive website that literally I can pull up any attorney or agent name or loan officer, and I can tell you how many times we've ever worked with them. And statistically, if I've never heard of them before, like, that's not a good probability for how this is going to end up. And I'd love to be wrong. I'd love to be wrong about all this stuff. But in reality, I'd rather be proactive and reactive than reactive. I'd rather be transparent upfront than backtracking. Because if our client, when we're speaking to them upfront, if we hold this in because we don't want to insult anybody, it's, oh, they're using a credit attorney, a union attorney. It's like, okay, I'm sure this is going to work out well. And I internalize that and I don't say anything. The transaction ends up being a nightmare. And they're like, real estate agent Douglas Elliman, Babylon, you can't allow your future clients to ever allow somebody else to use a union attorney. If your response is, oh yeah, I know, they would look at you like, well, why didn't you say anything up front? We could have avoided this entire situation. We could have went with a different buyer. That's why we're having this conversation. And of course, keeping with our theme here with the perfect closing, there's a list of attorneys. Ethically, you can't obligate somebody to utilize them. But if buyer A, the easy buyer, says, great, all these people are team players, I'll just go down the line and whoever picks up first. I don't even care if you do it alphabetically. It's just what's going to happen. Usually they shop for cost, and I get that too. But buyer B says, I'm using my litigation attorney because he or she represented me in a matrimonial item, and and we took advantage of the other side. It's like, great, just what I wanted to hear. Thanks so much. Okay. So again, that's with the attorneys, and you have to send an email out afterwards. I recommended that you don't use the person who sued for the trip and fall because they're not going to be good at this. And if and when they can't reach their own attorney, which is usually the case, you can say, it sucks that this happened. That's why I kind of suggested that way at the beginning, but we are where we are. We'll get through it, but thanks for not blaming me, right? Okay, because that's usually what ends up happening. Last but not least, then we'll see if you guys have any questions for me. And in my opinion, this is really the crux of it all. If you deal with a difficult attorney, like, we'll get through it. It's not that it's something we can't overcome. It's just a more difficult drive than we needed to undertake, right? And title, it's like, we'll fix that too. Home inspection, we can negotiate all that stuff. For me, the number one thing that I look at when I look at a sales agreement is, who are they pre-approved with, right? Because ultimately, I could be great and title could be clear and no home inspection issues and everything else. The one thing that's going to delay the transaction is going to be the loan, okay? Again, I'm going through it right now. I submitted all of my documentation. I happen to be an organized guy, and I received my commitment in like a week, right? And for the average client, they may not have all of these things readily available, but I can tell you, sure as hell, better bet that if they send something that was requested and they have to send it again, they're not going to be happy, okay? And all it takes is one time for it to happen. I'm not even talking about a repeated offense, which usually is the case. And if, when you see the pre-approval and you know the reputation, or even if you don't, Google it. I don't necessarily believe in online reviews personally, but some people do. Like, I've never written one ever in my life, but a lot of people look at that and view it as gospel, right? If I personally, to Diamond Law Group, have over 200 5-star reviews, it's like those people took their own time to do that, and basically are telling you as the reader, it's okay, you can use them, like I did, and everything turned out to be okay. Okay. So again, they don't mean everything, but they do mean something to someone. And when you see loan officers, and especially if you've had negative experiences, or you hear because people talk about how things go, you again owe it, no pun intended, to your homeowner to say, look, I had the last 5 transactions with this company and they were just terrible. Maybe this one's different, but if we have other options, which we do, you may want to go a different way, right? I've had clients specifically nowadays, actually my own deal, the people that we sold the home to specifically went with us because we knew what we were doing, even though our offer may not have been as high as somebody else's, because the value they saw in experience, right? Because what's an extra $5,000-$10,000 if you never get to the table? And if you do, it's going to be a complete nightmare, right? So that's what it is that we're trying to get to with our piles here. Again, my personal loan is with Fifth Third Bank. Like, you may not even know what that is, but it happens to be one of the biggest lenders in the country, because somewhere in Wisconsin, they don't have 6 banks in one block, right? They have one bank, and it happens to be in a supermarket. Like, so that's like Fifth Third Bank. So they happen to be a big bank. But if we're going for name recognition, there's banks out there that may be household names. Like, if I said to my wife, like, who's my loan with? They're gonna be like, Chase, I don't know, Wells Fargo, I don't know, right? She has no idea. But when we're going to your homeowners, some of these big box banks aren't necessarily as good as some of the unknown people. Like, you guys just, are now involved with Cross Country, who we've loved for like the longest time. But if you said, for the average homeowner, they're with big box bank because they happen to have a checking account there, or Cross Country, you don't know how that's necessarily going to play out. And there's good people and there's bad people within each company. So it's up to you to be able to determine who the company is and who within the company is actually good when you have the pre-approvals in front of you. Because again, I don't care how much they're offering, if they're never going to get it to the closing table and everyone's going to be completely upset by the manner in which the file was handed, then we have to tell everyone up front what is going to happen in the future. And again, to avoid all surprises. So again, keeping with our email trend here to our homeowners, or even your buyers for that matter, nice speaking with you. I'm glad you're going to use all of our other services regarding the loan. Homeowner, it's my personal opinion, we should go with this other thing, even though maybe they're offering a little bit less down and a little bit less money, because I feel more comfortable. Because ultimately, if there's going to be a complaint, open permits, yeah, okay, it is what it is. It's something that people can't wrap their head around, and they're like, but they were pre-approved. Like, why is this taking 60 to 90 days? And ultimately, it's just usually due to straight up incompetence or indifference on the bank's end. And you kind of need to get rid of that upfront if it could be avoided, especially reiterating all this stuff in writing. All right. And again, going to our piles here with our open house. The last one is for the pre-approvals from your in-house people there. And, if we have our easygoing buyer says, yeah, I'd love to be pre-approved. It doesn't matter, I was pre-approved elsewhere. I'd like to try these people out if it's going to get the job done. And then you have your difficult person that just doesn't want to hear from anything. And they say, I'm not dealing with this whichever bank you're suggesting, I'm going with my people. And, we'll just leave it at that. All right. So, just envisioning all of this every single day, one of these things are going to be a problem for me. And I genuinely feel that, especially with the loans, I'd say show of hands, but I really can't see everyone. But I'm sure you can appreciate, like, when a deal dies mid-contract because their mortgage was declined. Literally never should happen. What are they declined for? Income? Well, that's readily ascertainable from the onset unless something has happened, which the contract doesn't contemplate. Contract doesn't contemplate anything other than how you sign the contract. Second thing is debt to income ratios. Like, I'm not asking you guys, hey, Josh, when is Pluto and Mars going to align in the Northern Hemisphere in 2023? Like, that's a difficult question. But your debt to income ratios, it's like, this is a credit pull. This should all be known up front, right? You don't have enough liquid assets. What? Why are we in contract 60 days in? Why was an appraisal paid for? Why was a home inspection paid for? Why was any of this stuff done if this is the case? And it really should never, ever, ever happen. The only reason a mortgage should be declined is due to an appraisal issue, because that's something wholly outside of our control, and it's relying upon a third party. And I have another appraisal course, about talking about why appraisals should really be abolished. And they just started integrating desktop appraisals soon. So it's just a check mark. And that's, again, besides COVID reasons, because it's just from a practicality standpoint, when talking about appraisals, right? For my property, like I said, it appraised on price, but the appraiser was going to come in and be like, it's like $500 short. Like, that just never happens. But for our purposes now, mortgage declination should really not exist. And it's a major concern if and when it happens, because the buyer is upset, right? Usually, and the homeowner is even more upset. Like, what have we done? Especially if you have somebody who's buying and selling a house at the same time and they lose their buyer. Guess what? Most transactions are not contingent upon one another. And this is where feathers really get ruffled, because we then need to elongate our closing time frame. The people we're buying from are not going to be happy that we lost our seller, or sale rather, that we lost our buyer. All right. So unless you guys have any questions, you could use the chat or unmute and ask, or I'm sure Josh has a couple as well.
Sure. So the minimum, okay. Jen Convoy is going to jump on in a moment and ask a question. So tell me, like, when you get an email, like from an agent with that binder, tell me like the perfect email that you get. You're like, wow, it would be great if I got X, Y, and Z every time I got a purchase binder.
Yeah, sure. No problem. So it's funny you say that, one of the things we just filmed was how my partner, John, is going gray and losing his hair. And
I'm familiar with both. Yeah.
It's literally the spoof on it is because every time he gets a sales agreement, it doesn't have enough information on it. And then like one of them just falls out. Anyway, that'll be posted like in a couple of weeks. So what happens is everything moves so quickly and everyone is so quick to blame somebody who's not allegedly doing their job. And every Monday without fail, I get a sales agreement that doesn't have complete party names. Sometimes I literally can't make this stuff up. Yesterday, I legitimately did receive a binder from another attorney. They said, send me the contract. Who is my client? I've never spoken to this person before. And in reality, the agent never introduced me to them. And then the client wasn't available till later in the day. And yeah, they retained us, but like the whole day was killed. It's like, why did you tell them us? And we've never spoken. And the house has been listed for however long. And that's a lot of pressure because the agent's then calling me and then I'm telling them I've never spoken. Then the agent is then calling the client, like, why didn't you call them? Like, I'm busy with life. I can't do that right now. I'm like, well, they want to sign today. I'm like, this is unnecessary, 100% avoidable tension. Complete party names would be great. Purchase price should be self-explanatory. It's a little bit complicated when it says includes concession of this. It's like, does it include the concession of that, or should it be grossed up? And then people, especially homeowners, don't understand what they're supposed to net. So, if this is a seller's concession, there is no space on that for seller's concession. Another major issue are buyer brokerages. So the normal buyer brokerage, let's just say on MLS, is put out at 2%, but you want 3%. That's awesome. That's what I would do, right? But the problem is the seller doesn't understand that whatever offer the buyer made is netting out not only, let's just presume, a 4% listing, now it's 5% because the other side's getting an extra 1%. And that was never made clear to them. And then we get to the closing table and I have a 3% commission, a 2% commission. And the seller's like, buyer brokerage, go to them. It's like, no, that was included with your initial offer. So if you have buyer brokerage, it needs to specifically be stated on the sales agreement that it includes a buyer brokerage fee of this. Because then what I will do in my paragraph 27 is state where it says to both agents, it'll say selling agent or buyer brokerage is due 3% netted out of the existing purchase price on this contract. because what it usually says is that it's via separate agreement, and people don't read. And I hate to say something disrespectful, but I've been at a lot of closings where we're done and I've handed out checks and the agent's like, can you have the lead-based paint, the PCDA, and the agency disclosure signed? It's like, now, like, we're literally done. No, yeah, I needed to get my check. It's like, yeah, I get that, but now you're having people acknowledge things way, way, way after the fact. So in order to avoid issues with buyer brokerage, that's 100% necessary to state that up front. Down payment, consistently wrong. Down payment means two different things. And what happens is to buyers, they say, this is how much I'm putting down. Okay, let's just presume it's 20%. So the binder says $1 million. Down payment says 200 grand. And the buyer says, no, I'm putting down 100 now and 100 later. But that's not what the sales agreement says. So on a contract, this trips up a lot of people. And again, we're going to offer a continuing education where we go through the contract and all the pitfalls. On the contract, it says purchase price, less down payment. That just means down payment at contract. Then it says balance due at closing. That's in paragraph 3. Then if you skip to paragraph 8, it says 800,000. So it goes $1 million less 100,000 equals 900. And then you get to the mortgage, it says 800. And everyone's like, well, where'd the extra 100 go? That's just part of the difference in what's due at closing. So if you're going to put on the sales agreement that it's 200,000, 20% down, you should at least differentiate. This is how much is a contract. This is how much is that closing. That's the proper way to do it. Mortgage amount, it should be, whatever the difference is, whatever. Make sure the pre-approval is matching that. Closing date, honestly, it's never on there. ASAP, helpful. We know you want to close ASAP. That doesn't mean anything. You need to specifically put an actual date. And if you haven't had, and again, if you referred them to us up front, and we heard that there was an offer of which we would follow up with religiously, we would ask the client, like, when do you want to close? Hey, guess what? You found the house you wanted to buy in November, and we were supposed to close by the end of February. The people you're now selling to want to buy in May. These dates do not align. Has anyone discussed this with you? Because now you want me to send out a contract, they already paid for a home inspection, and the dates don't align. So whatever date is on, there should have been an actual conversation where both parties actually agreed to it. Keeping in mind that if you don't differentiate on or about, generally that means 30 days after. So if you write on or about 1/1, that tells me everything I need to know. If you just write 1/1, I don't know if that means on or about 1/1. I don't know if that means the first date that they want to close, the latest date they want to close, if they already booked a trip to Florida, for that. So an actual closing date would be awesome. Other than that, the nitty gritty of it is included personal items, fixtures, sentimental value typically, or really expensive. But if you start taking down expensive chandeliers, guess who's going to object? The buyer. So I send out a contract where it's excluded in paragraph 2, and the buyer says, well, I want compensation for that. And then we start talking about this, that, or the other thing when it was wholly avoidable up front. When you make your offer, on Stratus or One Key or whatever they call it, I know they change it like every day. You should have personal property exclusions stated specifically within the listing, right? And then some attorneys actually write in personal property as per listing, whatever. Problem is the back end of Stratus doesn't match up necessarily with the front end that the public sees. So, for me to say, oh, it's per this listing, well, if it's not public knowledge, how could this buyer actually be responsible for being aware of that fact? And that one other last thing, and this happens more frequently than I like to admit as well, and it's if there's a selling agent. So you're a great proactive listing agent, and you're working with a lazy selling agent or buyer's broker, and I just get a binder. Well, if I don't know that there's another agent involved from the buyer side, how am I going to draft a contract that has that person in here? And then we get to the buyer's attorney. Usually where there's an incompetent agent, it's an incompetent attorney with an incompetent bank and incompetent buyer, right? Because birds of the same feather flock together, because I wouldn't tolerate it. And what happens is in paragraph 27, it says one listing agent. And then we use the contract the bank does to generate the CD. And on the CD, you need all the agents listed. And when I'm scheduling a closing, we ask for commissions. We actually ask for it way in advance and sometimes don't get it, which is the last thing I'll talk about. And I get one commission. It may be for 3%. I may look at this and say, well, I wouldn't know if there's anything else. I don't see what's offered on Stratus or anything else. And then we walk into the closing, there's another agent sitting there. Like, where's my check? It's like, who are you? We haven't even communicated with you the entire time. Oh, I'm this person's agent. It's like, nobody would ever know that, right? Mm-hmm. So if there's another agent, it really should be clearly indicated on whatever sales agreement's there. If you're using the boilerplate form, if you have your own thing and you type up everything, that's cool as well. Last thing is commissions. I don't know what else to say other than if you want to get paid, you have to send it to us. And it may sound self-explanatory, but it never really happens. So literally the day we're in contract, we send out everything you need to know, timeframes, outstanding contingencies, et cetera. And there's a small piece at the bottom that says, dear agents, we need this for the CD well in advance. And then what ends up happening, we follow up every single week and we never get it until we're actually scheduled, which sometimes does delay the transaction because some banks, including cross-country, require the agent information to be disclosed on the CD before they will send it out to the homeowner. So today's Tuesday, right? If we want to close Friday, that CD ticking time frame is today. If I don't have a commission, it's just not going to happen. We literally can't send out what we need to our closing department, to the homeowner or potential homeowner to purchase this home if we don't get it today. So it does necessarily tie things up. So if it were me as the agent, I would send the commission agreement with the actual binder itself, and that would tell everybody what it needs to know. When it comes to commission agreements, it needs to have your broker's license number on it, as well as your own license number, and then a breakdown of who's getting what commissions. So again, if there's a selling agent on it, don't just put your information. It's honestly not all too helpful. You should put what they're receiving as well, because ultimately, if we reach out to them 1,000 times and we copy you on it and they just don't send it to us, that's also problematic. So I hope that was enough of an attorney answer for you, Josh.
That was pretty good. I mean, we get that, like the TRID information later on and all that good stuff. So wild as I was brought up in the North Fork in real estate, where the first time I saw the LIBOR sales agreement was where I came to Babylon. Everything we did was on the memorandum of sale, which broke down both parties, who the attorneys are, right? So X amount on contract, X amount on close, subject to a mortgage of X, CO language, all the TRID information, all that stuff was kind of included in that memo, because we want to give it, straight away. I don't want to be the reason why things get held up. And there's some stuff that, right, like you can't, like if you don't have the TRID information, they can't move forward, right? And then you got a mandatory wait period after the last disclosure goes out, and all of a sudden we're the jerk, right? Because we didn't give them 2 pieces of information, and then well, they could have looked it up. I was like, well, that's not their job, right? It's not their job.
We actually do look it up if we know who it is. So
right.
I'm a huge advocate of, even if it's somebody else's job, if I'm capable of doing it, I'm going to do it, because it actually takes me less work to do it one time than follow up 3 times.
Yeah, I hold, because I'm terrible at follow up. I agree. I'm just a doer. I see she's still on here. Jen Conboy, did you have your question? He answered it. Rich nailed it already. Oh, he's so good.
Mind reader too.
Right, exactly. You have ESPN, as I say. So thank you so much for explaining all that stuff. I always say, like, an ounce of preparation is worth a pound of work. So give all that stuff up ahead of time. My listing appointment is very much the confessional, and I just sit with my seller and go, okay, I'm going to find out anyway, but what does the town not know about, right? So we get ahead of it and we can draft that language back and forth. I try to give up, all when I possibly can, the FOIL information ahead of time. One thing I thought you were great on this transaction that we just did together was, like aligning the dates. So you did a great job of explaining everything, and the purchaser still wanted to buy, and you're like, okay. And you explained it really, really well. You have a gap between your sale and your purchase. What's your plan? You don't have to tell me it, but you need to have one personally. I thought it was just really well done. And they were like, okay, we're willing to accept that risk. We'll figure that part out, because every transaction is different, right? It's all gray. None of real estate is black and white, right?
I mean, and if we didn't go over that, what would have happened?
It'd been your fault or my fault. You didn't tell me, right? You didn't tell me. Honestly, you're going to be homeless.
Even after somebody agrees to it, I then reiterate it the next day. Right. Just to make sure that there's been no changes, because sometimes there are.
Right. Or sometimes what they hear is not what you meant to say. And so, yes, I did notice that one thing. I was like, wow, that's very different, that you guys have a lot of follow-up emails, like just to encapsulate what we spoke about. And he laid it back out there. I was like, you know what? Because I'm a psycho with my email, and I always search that stuff later on, right? Because, conversation is you versus me, and the email is forever, right? So I thought that was really different. That's the first time I've really seen that level of follow-up in a long time. So anybody have any questions for Rich? I mean, it's a wealth of knowledge here to hit on, but he will send us all these kind of checklists on how to be prepared. And I tell you, if you lean forward, a couple different things. If you lean forward by making your seller's counsel aware of any risk profile so that they can include protective language in it, that is a big deal. That is a huge that is the most referable conversation is Josh and Rich, they protected me on this. It was great. And we made it a leverage. On the buyer side, if you can identify that and make Rich available and aware that there is a defect in that property, that he can smartly craft language to leverage that in your buyer's favor, man, that is all the difference in the world. So I'll tell you, that is, I just had one recently where we did that and we leveraged it completely. And it saved the purchaser $110,000 in the seller's market. That's not normal, right? So if you have any questions about how to get prepared, Rich has got a lot of stuff, and follow his social media stuff. He'll send that back out. It's really well done. It gets you, I would say, it gets me more familiar with Rich and who he is, because I know when I'm selecting folks, Rich said it early on, we're not just getting the realtor, we get the realtor's team, right? And so who we refer is part of our brand. And just on the other side, when I'm selecting somebody to do a transaction with, we're getting married to that other party. My first questions are, who's their attorney, right? Who's the mortgage professional? What title company are you going to use? I ask those questions ahead of time, because that makes a difference to me, right? And can help a more riskier buyer be effective in this market, because they have a big team behind us. I just took a sale contingency in this market, which was wild, right? Who's taking a sale contingency? But he had a great attorney, had a great mortgage professional, and the buyer was well qualified. So we took what inherently is a riskier deal, but it was better for my seller in the end. So seller's happy, buyer's happy, but you got to have all that, that teamwork together. It makes all the difference. So Rich, shout out how do we follow you on Facebook? How do we follow you on Instagram?
Yeah, sure. So just on Facebook, it's just for Diamond Law Group, and Instagram, it's just pretty much the same thing. There's an underscore, but on our website, Diamond Law Group, there's something that says follow us, and it has all of our different platforms, whichever ones you're more familiar with.
Beautiful.
Just one thing real quick, Josh, that's actually a using point, because we're so ingrained with the seller's market. From a buyer's perspective, I have been told many times over by the other agent that the offer was accepted because it was us as the attorney with the loan officer. Because again, it's like I said before, birds of the same feather flock together. I can predict, and I hate being right, how things are going to go based upon everything we just discussed. I know who the agent is, I know who the attorney is, and I can pretty much guess who the loan officer is going to be. And I tell my clients up front, if you have anyone else, and within reason, I would strongly suggest doing so. And if you want to move forward, that's totally cool, because I will get you to where you need to go, but it's going to be way more bumpier. So last analogies, I tell people, no matter which time you go to Manhattan, it's going to suck, but sometimes there's better ways. And if I can navigate a better way, it's still going to take some time to get there, but it's better than just sitting in traffic and then just yelling at everyone else in the car about how terrible your experience has been. Because nowadays, experience is key. Everyone wants to have a positive flow and karma and all the other stuff throughout. And one blip in the radar, you're going to get lumped in and averaged down. If 3 out of these 4 people are 100 and somebody's a 0, we're all 75s as far as this person's concerned. And I myself won't allow that to happen, because I work too hard to allow somebody else that I don't control bring me down. And that's just the way it is.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rich. I appreciate you being on, sharing your knowledge with me. And it's been a pleasure to get to know you on a personal level, on a professional level. Congratulations on what you've created. You know, a great job. I'm really proud of everything that you've put together there. So if we don't have any questions up in the chat, and Sheila Hale, thank you for your kind words. I will let everybody go. Feel free to stay on. I am going to I have a couple questions for Rich. I'm going to interview him afterwards. Feel free if you want to stay on and explore Rich on a deeper level. But thank you everybody for your time. I really appreciate you guys jumping on.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you, Rich.